quite new to Amplitude, and I've just onboarded on a role with a Saudi-based company that's in food and beverage. It was basically run between engineering and data. So there's a lot of messy data, quote unquote, funnels that are not set up properly, things within that regard. What would be your recommendation? Which sections to start with in order to set up proper Amplitude account?
If you're grabbing a legacy implementation that is maybe not very well documented, figure out what is the history of the account, how did Amplitude come in the company, and how did it grow? In organic growth situations, what you have is one department will start with Amplitude and another one will start later. As a result, you have different projects. What does that mean? That data resides within one project and is locked unless you have portfolio views. It also means that you can't cross the data. People who are in business unit 1 and users are engaging in that part of the product cannot be analyzed in the same way when they move into another section. In my head, one project is one data set and they are isolated. So have a look at the number of projects. What are the use cases you want to tackle? What I like to use is this. We call user story canvas, but there's also templates from Amplitude. They have this thing called a workbook. When you go talk to managers, people who are at higher levels and who aren't necessarily analysts, this is where the discrepancy lies. The difference between use cases and user stories. Use cases are broad IDs. I would like to understand how many users do we have on a daily basis, or I would like to understand how our sign-up funnel is performing. A user story is actually, as a product analyst or product owner, I would like to understand how many tries people need in order to complete the first stage of my funnel. It means that one use case can be broken down in multiple user stories. What I also like to do upfront is to understand what KPI am I actually looking for? What am I analyzing? Am I looking for frequency? Am I looking for a conversion rate? Am I looking for just a total count? And then from there, I actually walk into a user story walkthrough, but also into data points. And the data points is actually the tracking plan. I would like to understand the performance of my sign-up funnel. I would like to understand what the conversion rate is within 2 hours for users initiating the funnel and then completing sign-up. My user story walkthrough would be all of the actions a user actually needs to take, including the screens. And my data points captured would be my actual tracking plan, which would indicate which data points I actually need. There's one thing I always want to check if you take over an account that for me is non-negotiable. The section where user creation happens. Within Amplitude, when is a user created in your project? So imagine you have a sign-up. Typically, you have a first screen where you need to input your email. In your second case, you would have credit card completed, personal details completed. Then when you hit the button, you get this thank you screen and it says sign up completed. At this stage, screen 1, what Amplitude actually is going to do is going to create a device ID if you're on mobile. The SDKs always create a device ID. As soon as you have your sign up completed, you basically have a user ID that resides in the database of your company. If Client Human 37 is using his iPhone, his website, or his Android phone, after sign in, you're always going to attribute me the same user ID, but I might have 3 device ID. It means that your user ID has at least 1 device ID associated to it. Otherwise, you risk the fact that your sign-up flow is done by a user under a device ID, and all of the rest, as soon as a login is completed, you have a separate user entirely. What you want is that to be resolved. If you start creating orphaned users or ghost profiles, you basically start having troubles with your user measurement as such long-term, potentially. As a result, if you ask Amplitude to calculate daily, weekly, monthly active users, your counts are going to be off depending on the area which you try to analyze, because a user might actually not have been successful at completing something, or you might have different profiles that exist for a single user depending on the device that they use.
Thank you so much.